water.
Scotty B going to work in the paint.
Eastern Conference Final. New NBA champion. And it's a team from Toronto, Canada. We, the North, are now we, the champions.
What is going on, Raptors Nation? Is Luca here back with the Raptors Nation podcast. In today's pod, we are going to keep things straight and simple. I'm going to take a look at the Raptors' final 12 games of their regular season. The season is coming to an end, just like that. Another Raptors campaign almost in the books. And then I'm going to look ahead to the Tankathon. Of course, all eyes on the upcoming draft. Where are the Raptors going to pick? Who are they going to select? I dropped a separate video on my personal channel looking at some potential picks for the Toronto Raptors pre-draft lottery edition. So you could go check that out as well. But before I dive into today's show, do me a solid, everybody. Drop a like on the video. Smash the subscribe button for more Raptors content over here on the Raptors Nation YouTube channel. And be sure to leave us a 5-star review wherever you get your favorite podcast, Apple, iTunes, and Spotify. So the Raptors, they are coming off yet another loss. They had done a bunch of winning, but then this West Coast trip was just what the doctor ordered for all my fellow Tank Nation members. As the Raptors, they lost by 3 to the Blazers. Then they got blown out by the Suns by 40. And just recently, they actually fought hard against the Golden State Warriors. Tightly contested matchup. Stephen Curry left the game with a pelvic contusion, did not return. Raptors saw some great games from Emmanuel Quickley, Scotty Barnes. Battle was on fuego from downtown, and it looked like the Raptors were going to steal another win, but the Golden State Warriors were able to pull one out. They were able to secure a 3-point win. Jamal Shead also played solid in that game as well. So now the reality for the Raptors, 12 games left, 7th worst record in the NBA. They're behind the likes of the Nets and Sixers to try to get back into that bottom 5 spot. The Raptors are not going to get into the bottom 4. At least their record's not going to get them in the bottom 4. The draft lottery could, but basically what's going to be interesting is where the Raptors fall at the end of the season. Where are they going to be slotted to pick at? Is it going to be 7, which they're currently at? Are they going to continue to drop, which I hope doesn't happen? And what I'm worried about, honestly, is that the Miami Heat can't buy a win right now. And we're about to look at the Raptors' upcoming games, ridiculously easy schedule. So they're not even out of the clear yet when talking about the play-in, which is just crazy to even think. Or can they get lucky and move on up? Can they still end the season with the 5th worst record? Of course, they occupied that 5th worst record for the majority of the season, but then they went on that little bit of a run where they couldn't stop winning. And then teams like the Sixers and Nets just took tanking to a whole new level. And I mean, look at that previous Nets loss. I think they were up at one point and then they completely fell apart at the end. So the Sixers and the Nets, they have just been finding different ways to tank. The Sixers, too, they held a big lead against the Rockets. They fell apart there at the end. I think they lost that game in overtime. So teams are getting desperate. Teams are getting creative. And this tank is getting ugly. But that being said, the Raptors, 12 games left. We'll see where they end up when it's all said and done. But let's take a look at the Raptors' upcoming schedule. And let's break things down. As I said, it is going to be very, very tough, in my opinion, for the Raptors to out-tank the Nets and the Sixers the rest of the way to get into that bottom 5 spot. Because you look at it right here, just at first glance, a lot of winnable games. I mean, it's crazy how the schedule makers did the Raptors dirty by having all of their tough opponents at the beginning and then all of their easier opponents at the end. I would have liked for the schedule to have more balance to it, where now, the Raptors would be taking on playoff-esque teams, tough opponents, but that's not the case. It was a complete flip where the Raptors started off tough. That's the reason why they got off to such a bad start, and then they're going to end off easy. So let's take a look at it right here. The Raptors, they got 12 games left. They got the San Antonio Spurs on March 23rd, which is Sunday. And they're going to be at home. The Raptors are. And San Antonio is a team that is tanking. They have shut down some key players. No Wemby, of course. And honestly, because this is at home, it's interesting how the Raptors are going to keep approaching this thing, because I feel like the most difficult part before I get into the rest of these matchups about like trying to understand where the Raptors are at and what they're trying to do is, prime example, that Golden State game, right? It's like, is this team trying to tank? Are they not trying to tank? It's like that game against Golden State, the Raptors, they open up the fourth quarter with their starters. Then they pull their starters. And it's like, okay, they're going to shut down the starters. It's going to be another, I guess, obvious tank. But then they put the starters back into the game late. And it actually gives them a chance to win that game. So it's like the Raptors are unsure what they're trying to do. Maybe they're doing that so the NBA doesn't crack down on them. So that was I guess, executed perfectly if you look at it from that perspective of them still losing a game where they didn't purposely pull the starters for the remainder of the fourth. But at the same time, it's like they almost messed around and won one of their last remaining tough games. So what are we going to see here? Are we going to see just a blatant, ugly tank of like pulling the starters for the entirety of the second half? Because honestly, I think you're going to need to do that if you want to lose against some of these teams. You're going to have to get ugly with it. You're going to have to get very, very unethical. And you can't get away with playing your starters for the majority of the game and then to start the fourth and then play them even late in a game and expect to still lose. Like, even if they still play their starters at the beginning of the fourth and they pull them for the rest, that still might not be enough to lose against some of these teams. So are the Raptors going to step one up because we're approaching the end of the season? Are they going to really try to tank here? But it seems like they're unsure what they're trying to do. Game to game, you see their different personnel, see how they manage it. So that was the confusing part to me watching that Warriors game. It's like when they pulled the starters, like, okay, here we go, they're going to shut them down. But then when they brought them in back, I'm like, what's going on here? So if that happens and the Raptors continue to play their starters, and it is important to note, they were basically a fully healthy team in terms of their starters, minus RJ Barrett. So like Yak was out there, Quickly was out there, Barnes was out there. What's interesting too was that we had seen Emmanuel Quickly and Jakob Poeltl kind of interchange when they would play together and sit out, or really they weren't playing together. It would be one or the other. But this game, they finally played together. I think it was the first game they played together since like early March, I want to say. So we'll see what their approach is. But against the Spurs team, they're going to have to tank hard if they want to lose that game. But honestly, I see the Raptors winning that game. And then they take on the Wizards. March 24th. Yeah, they've been playing better, the Wizards, but the Wizards are probably at a point now where like they're just going to bottom out completely. That's going to be another tough game for the Raptors to lose. See the Raptors winning that one. The big one's going to be the Nets game. I mean, if you talk about a horrible, horrible game upcoming, this is going to be it. Two teams desperately trying to lose that one, but I don't trust the Raptors when they have must-lose games, because we saw that earlier in that matchup against the Sixers when they're trying to out-tank the Sixers. It didn't work, so I have the Raptors winning this one too. I really think the Nets are going to just take it up a notch, and yeah, I don't like the Raptors in must-lose situations. Then you got the Hornets, another tough one to lose. Then you got the Sixers. Again, it's going to be another tanking masterclass. I trust Nick Nurse in that situation more than I trust Darko. So you're looking at a potential 5-game winning streak out of a 3-game losing streak. And who knows what the Heat are going to be doing at this point, because like I said, I am worried about the Miami Heat. I'm not worried about the Chicago Bulls. I think they'll win here and there, and they've done a good job of like not sucking too bad. But the Heat have not gotten a win. What are they on now? Like a 9-game losing streak at the time of this recording. The Heat might just they might not win again. That's how bad they've been. So it's like if the Raptors do roll the dice here, win 5 in a row, and the Heat keep losing, there's only, I think, 5 games separating them right now. All of a sudden, like that thing's just gonna close in. And then you're talking about, oh my goodness, are the Raptors really gonna be going for the play-in? So I'm hoping they lose some games here, but on paper, I think these are 5 straight wins. I really do. Like maybe they drop one of the Nets Sixers games, but I'm very worried about this stretch. Then I feel good about April 1st, 3rd, and the 4th, just because I think the Bulls always give the Raptors problems. Chicago's probably going to come out wanting to obviously win that game, play that game. They're kind of forced into a play-in spot, and I would have been more nervous about that if the Bulls hadn't already got in the tiebreaker, but they do. So that basically gives them another game over the Raptors, going back to that last time these two teams played. It was just a wild, wild outing. But I think the Bulls will be able to win this one in Chicago. Portland, I feel good about too, just because they beat the Raptors already. And the Blazers are a team to me that they're not really like blatantly tanking. They got a lot of good young players that are trying to go out there and win. Similarly to the Raptors, about the whole like management might want to tank, but players don't. So I could see the Blazers winning this one too. And then the Pistons. Who would have thought the Pistons on April 4th would mark the remaining team the Raptors play that is above 500? That is the reality. But I do like the Pistons in this spot. I think this is going to be a super important game for the Pistons. They're going to want to win. Obviously, try to move on up in the standings and keep their positioning. So I think for the Pistons, that is going to be a very, very important game, must-win game. I mean, they're pretty comfortably in that 6th spot, but you look ahead, up the standings in the East, they can still move up as far as 4. So that is important because they want home court advantage in the first round, you would think. And then to close the season, I'm nervous again because then you got the Nets again. It's going to be a full-on tank off. Maybe the Raptors can lose one to the Nets if they win the previous one. Hornets, I think the Raptors are going to beat the Hornets here. Who knows what the Hornets are going to look like at this point? But again, who knows what the Raptors are going to look like? Maybe at this point they completely shut down Scotty Barnes and their players. And that's another interesting thing too. I know the Raptors are still holding out for Scotty's chances at All-NBA, and I know it's very unlikely he's going to get it, but they're not purposely going to eliminate him by sitting out games. But maybe we get to a point in these last 4, call it last 5, where the Raptors just simply shut down their guys. And now all of a sudden, you're not playing Quickly, Barnes, Barrett, Pirtle any minutes anymore. And you're just fully starting with the reserves and the 905 guys. So maybe that's the situation with this bottom 4, but still, I see the Raptors pulling all wins over the Nets, over the Hornets, probably even over the Mavs. Because the Mavs actually might be interesting. It depends on if AD actually comes back, because apparently he does really want to come back. So maybe the Mavs are trying to go for the play at this point. So that's something that's worth keeping an eye out for, because right now they're tied with the Suns for that 10th and final play-in spot. So if AD somehow comes back, then yeah, like they should be able to win that game. I would think the Mavs, just by having AD out there. And then you close with the Spurs. So again, this is just going to be another brutal watch. 2 teams that are probably not going to have any starters play in it. And that basically sums up the Raptors season. So just some main takeaways here. 11 of the next 12 matchups for the Raptors to close out their season are against sub 500 teams. That is ridiculous. Their lone matchup against the above 500 team, the Detroit Pistons, a lot of winnable games. You look at the NBA standings for what it's worth. The Raptors, they are 5.5 back of the Heat. So they do have a little bit of cushion, but again, how quickly can that evaporate if the Raptors start winning and the Heat keep losing? So that's what I'm concerned about. And then also another thing to keep an eye on here, when will the Raptors pull the starters completely? Are we going to get to a point in that where the Raptors don't play their starters anymore and they really get ugly with this thing in the final 10 games? And then I don't think we're going to see Brandon Ingram. I know that's been a topic of conversation. I'd be surprised. Like, I don't see BI playing the season, because if he does play, you would think it'd be in the final 7 to 5 games. And really at that point, you're talking about our other starters going to be sat out. So do you really want BI to make his Raptors debut when you got the reserves playing heavy minutes or the 905 guys getting leeway and run? I would hold off on BI, build the anticipation, save him from any potential tweak, further injury. Let him be just 1,000%. I know Brian Windhorst called him out for it. I don't care what Brian Windhorst has to say. The Raptors got to do what's best for them. Sit him out, come back next season, and let's wait for BI to make his Raptors debut in the preseason of next season. So I'm not worried about that. Like, I'm not eager to see BI play. Hold him out to next season. So those are kind of like the tidbits to keep an eye out for. And then when you look at the grand picture here of just looking at the tankathon, this is where the Raptors find themselves, right? So they have the 7th worst record, as you can see right here. The Raptors, 24-46. They've lost 3 in a row, but they're half back of the Sixers in the reverse standing. So, I mean, it's not impossible for them to get back into the top 5 or the bottom 5, and they're a game back of the Nets. But again, just looking at these respective teams' schedules to end the season, the Raptors have the easiest schedule in all of the NBA. It's going to be hard for them to keep losing That's why these 3 straight losses are big, because they didn't want to make these teams gain even more ground on them. But you look at the Raptors, if the season were to end today, they would have a 32% chance at the top 4 picks. So I guess not impossible to get luck on your side. Obviously, you're going to be holding out for that if you're a Raptors fan. And then the magic number, 7.5% to get the number 1 overall pick. That's when you get Cooper Flag. But in all likelihood, like I mentioned in my personal video, again, go check it out if you want to see some players I have the Raptors potentially taking in these spots. You're looking at 5 to 8 if you're the Toronto Raptors. Obviously, if they stay where they are at 7, if they can get into that 5, and then worst case, they fall back to 8, which you don't want to see. You're looking at this range of like 5 to 8, even call it 5 to 9. So, yeah, that's basically where the Raptors find themselves, guys. So we'll see what the record looks like even after the next 5, because ridiculously easy next 5, as I mentioned. Then it lightens up a bit in terms of they're going to be taking on some better teams, although I wouldn't necessarily say a 3-game stretch that includes the Bulls, Blazers, and Pistons is a tougher stretch. I mean, with the exception of the Pistons, I got to give them credit. They've been really good this season, but the Blazers and the Bulls, I mean, they have just been inconsistent. Then you're ending it off bad. Again, if AD's not playing and the Mavs completely shut it down, which I think they're going to do at that point, you got 4 easy games to close the year. So then what's that going to welcome in for the Raptors? So I don't think this has ever happened where the end of a season in which a team has a terrible record and they're in essence out of it still has a lot of intrigue game to game to close things out. Like last season at this time, like it was just a wash, right? Raptors getting blown out. You knew what to expect. This season, you don't know what to expect. Like there is so much intrigue in these final 12 games where it's like, what are the Raptors going to look like? Are they going to flat out tank? Are they going to somehow win their way into being in play-in range because they're still not eliminated from that? And where's this team going to ultimately end? Like there is so much at stake game to game to close out these final 12 that it's crazy that a team that is 24-46 still has a lot of excitement to it in terms of how they're going to end their season. Because yeah, the Raptors could very well finish with the bottom 5 record, or they could stay where they're at, or they can very well be in the play-in, for crying out loud. We could be doing shows in a couple weeks from now previewing the Raptors' first play-in game because the Heat never won again and the Raptors never lost again. That is in the realm of possibilities. So it is crazy, guys. I tell you, this has just been a wild, wild season, and we'll see what happens. But let me know your thoughts, guys. I'm going to end it there. Going to keep it a short pod. Where do you think the Raptors are going to ultimately end? Do you think there's still a chance this team gets into the play-in? And who are some draft prospects you got an eye out for when looking at that 5 to 8 range? Drop your comments down below. Drop a like on the video. Smash the subscribe button for more. And again, follow this podcast. Rate this podcast wherever you get your favorite podcast. Apple, iTunes, Spotify. Be sure to leave us a 5-star review. It helps a ton. And go and follow me on X at Luca Rosano 3 for all things Raptors and NBA. That is it for me. It's Luke signing off. Thanks for watching. I will catch you all again in the next one.